Mr. Miller, do the 5 ones.
I can check for you.
You know, when you turn the camera on, there's not a little red light out here.
Maybe I'm not recording.
Oh, but I don't think there is. Remember the other night Haley thought the camera wasn't red. It was so funny. We started to take movies over and she goes, oh, wait, the camera's not ready. So she stopped. Yeah.
So that's why I thought when I said her, she should be on 2 years old. But
Lisa Esper and Kathy plaster of Paris on Saturday.
To be a wrestler. You're all right. Phil, you want a scouting trip?
family, friends, administrators, school personnel, all the different people that do so much to help everybody. Breaking bread with them. First thing we'd like to thank the parents. I told Mrs. Miller if we had the names of everybody, and she said they're just too numerous to mention. So all the mothers and dads that worked on setting up the cafeteria and making it look like 100% better than what these guys are accustomed to seeing it. And I know that they got fed better tonight than they're accustomed to food that they get in the cafeteria. But just because we didn't have school last Thursday and Friday, they got the leftovers, and that's what they're eating this week. But we want to especially thank some of the other people. Mr. Dave Tome was over here with the quarterback club, and Dave is running that concession stand and doing a great job and helping us tremendously with the football program here at Grand Ledge High School. Thank you very much, Dave. And the quarterback club is headed by President Mike Cook. And Mike, where are you sitting there? We also, are you in the back? Oh, he's back up there. And sorry, thank you. And looking at the cafeteria and seeing how many people that we have that participate in football in the Grand Ledge area, I think that that's not from a fact that such a great program at the lower levels. And Mr. Chuck Byam, who I was hoping would come, and we didn't see him though, did we, John? And so Chuck and John and all the men and mothers that work so hard down there in the youth football program, it does a great thing. These guys were talking about that down at Brighton, about how they'd been together for 6 and 7 years, participating in the programs together. And so the youth area football, if you convey to them, John, about how much we appreciate that, and we'll drop Chuck a note. I know that after 25 years, right, that he's calling it quits after this past season. And but Pete Facilian, Chuck, John Eisler, and all I can't mention all the people that have been so great in that program. So thank you guys for that, everything you do. People that we probably put about as much gray hair on and make about as nervous as our game nights are the athletic department, and Gary Boyce and Sandy Sipes. I see Sandy over there. Where did Gary go? He sneak out on us? We just want to thank them, and without Sandy, I don't think any of us coaches would ever have the paperwork in. She bird dogs us and makes sure that these guys have all the necessary paperwork, and she even defends us when we talk about pay to play and all those mean things and mean-spirited things that everybody wants to do to us. But thank you, Sandy, and to your boss, Gary, too. The one thing about these young men up here that they enjoyed, and I think that probably they can have some of the best stories that they'll ever tell, will be about Art Pettit and Mr. Moore and the freshman coaches and their freshman season. And what a great experience that was. And we invited Bill and Arv, and they were unable to make it this evening, but they do a tremendous job. And also Coach Rademacher, Coach Love are here representing the JV squad, another undefeated year. And all these plaques up here, Roger makes all those in recognition. And nobody in the Grand Lakes community has done more for the football program than Roger Love has. And so thank you, Mike and Roger, for that. Also from our administration, our principal, Gary Kamenga, who's, where'd you go, Gary? He leaves, Sandy? Well, then we're not saying anything nice about it. I would like to say about how supportive that the administration is. One of my concerns, and one of the big things that becomes more involved as you go along in coaching, is looking after these guys as best we can in and out of the school. And so in the classroom, we were just as an example for your parents to understand that when, you know, a lot of times the school board and the administration thinks that they're doing the right thing when they try to make eligibility rules and things like this. We have one young man that's struggling. So Mr. Wojcinki and I today sat down all morning and we're looking at things like his grades. And here's a young man that's not one of our players, but at the lower level. And when we looked at his test scores, his reading comprehension was 17. The average is 53 for a middle school student. He has a 17. So we thought, well, this boy must misbehave. You know, he's failing 5 of his 6 classes, and he's getting a D in the other one. So I went back and we started looking at this. And there are some really concerned educators. And it's nice to know that the principal, assistant principal, counseling center, we got them involved in this. And we're working hard at trying to get this young man an opportunity. Without athletics, I don't think he'd stay in school. But with athletics, it gives him something that he wants to pursue and he wants to play. And we as educators need to make sure that we provide. And the one thing that we liked about this young man was that when we looked at his attendance record, it was almost perfect. But yet he just does not have, and he's one of those that slips through the cracks. He comes to class, he comes to school every day, he goes to class, he's not disruptive. And so it just becomes a matter of, those aren't things that we worried about in days gone by. Those weren't things that we were concerned about as far as, because there's just much more emphasis on good grades. We have 20 all-conference academic football players in Grand Lakes, 20. We will have an outstanding shot at being the Class A academic team of the state of Michigan. I have no doubt about that. Mrs. Miller was kind enough to do all that through the counseling center and everything. And so we have some perfect students from 4 Points. But just so you parents know that athletics is important to these other kids that are on the other end of the academic spectrum. And it's so important that we stick together and that we make boards of education and administrators understand that school is not just confined to what is in the classroom. These guys, as I wrote in that little note to the seniors and juniors, what they have done in their athletic career, what they have done in the program, will be as beneficial to them as anything that they have learned academically. And so I hope that you will continue. You've always been great about that. Continue to support our efforts to involve. You know, some people think that sports should just be for the best students. Well, that's not realistic. Plus, it's not fair. Some kids stay in this building because of the fact that athletics gives them an opportunity to do something. And people that have a 17 on their reading and comprehension are not successful in the classroom. They're very frustrated. They're disappointed. And all too often, of course, they're embarrassed to go up and say, well, geez, I can't read. You know, I've always said that in education, that has to be one of the greatest gifts, is for anybody that can teach a young person, young boy or girl, you know, how to read. It comes easy for a lot of our students, but it also comes as an effort. So please continue to support us on that, and support the kids more than support. When I say us, I'm talking about these young people as well. Jason, where's our trainer? Jason, right back over here. Jason, will you stand up? I wanted to publicly thank Jason for a tremendous job that he did as our trainer this year. The guys really enjoyed him. Plus, as you look at him, he's a Notre Dame fan, so he's I have a soft spot for him. And then we all have to stick together, those Notre Dame fans. And but he just did a tremendous job, and I know that your sons were treated very well, and he always had their best interest, and it was Dr. O'Connor that came out and helped with the games, and so would you thank Dr. O'Connor, and how about a hand for Jason? The man that was responsible for the films, where's Mr. Henning? Larry, where are you? Oh, right back there. And who's climbed up on that press box and has gone with us on scouting trips and everything else. And Larry has just done a tremendous job and of doing the filming and everything for us. And Larry, we hope that you'll stick around even though Jeff graduates, and that you'll continue to help us, and we sure appreciate it. And how about a hand for Larry? And then, of course, those men that we put on the other side of the sidelines over there, and we tell them to keep an eye on Jeff Smith so he doesn't... I got to tell you this quick story. Jeff Smith was so incensed that the State Journal called me up and asked about the playoff game and who I thought would win, and that after the game was over and they had won in the playoffs, that one of the State Journal reporters went up and said, Coach, can I talk to you for a few minutes? And he said, pardon my French girls, he said, get the hell out of here. He says, if you want a quote from somebody, go ask O'Keefe for a quote. So that was his comment. But these men that are sitting back here and are honored guests of ours, they keep an eye on Jeff Smith and Bob Myers, and that's John Ross has been running our chain gang for how many years, John?
Started in 61.
Who started in 1961? That's when I was even a teenager then. So, but Chuck Mornellis and Mike Edgel, Kevin Garth, and Mr. Bob Shalappy, thank you very much for all your... We certainly hope that we are able to give credit to most everybody, and we're looking towards things. It's kind of a final thing, but it isn't. And so, as I told the kids before even the Brighton game, football isn't over for any of them. I mean, football is. My son Patrick told me. He said, Dad, I can still play football anytime I want to. All I have to do is go get 10 other guys, and we have to get 11 other guys to play against, and we can still play a game of football. So, tell the guys that it's still that same game, that when they weren't worried about what the crowd said and what the paper said, and they started playing in elementary school, and they were kind of proud of the fact that even though Mother came shocked when she saw that blood on the knees of their new school pants and everything else, but that was kind of a badge of honor. And the way that they participated was that it keeps the flame burning brightly in their hearts, and hopefully these guys will always remember that all the good years and the good times that they had playing this great game of football. So, without further ado, let me introduce our coaches that are here this evening. And as a parent and as well as a coach, Denny Bongard, sitting over here. Denny, please stand up. Sitting next to Coach Bongard, Coach Lonier. Coach Ditsworth is sitting over here. Coach Bird, who's behind me, back here. Coach Ellsworth, he's right down here. Please stand up, John. Coach Fabry is over here with we know that it takes a lot of time and energy to put into coaching, and as a coaching staff, we think that we're pretty special here at Grand Ledge, having an opportunity to work with your sons, having nearly 60 players on the varsity. There's not always the best way to try to get everybody a starting assignment. That just is nearly impossible. I know these guys had everything at heart, and for all the disappointment, for all the pain, suffering, what else did you see down there after the Brighton game? I saw a lot of good things, but I saw anger in people's faces, and it's not easy. As I said always before, coaching is probably one of the hardest arts, just like teaching is. I used to think medicine was, but they've specialized medicine so much that people realize that if you don't, if it's broken, and you can go to a lot of different people to fix it. In coaching, there's only a few of us, and we have to do the best that we can. We always ask the good Lord to try to watch over us so that we treat your sons fairly, and we try to put the best players out there, and we try to make those decisions. As I go along in my coaching career, I look back at the people that influenced my life, and a lot of them were coaches that I had in professional baseball, as well as in college and high school. So I want to thank these men, and especially their families, for giving up so much time. And so we get home pretty late, and I think that oftentimes we forget about leaving it out there, just like the kids. They bring it home with them. And you know that their disappointment when you see them open the door. And it's no different for our families either. And so thank you, coaches, for all your time and energy and hard work that you put into it. Okay, let's move into just a couple observations that I had about the season before we get into the individual honors. The senior class, we dressed them. They are the only class to win 3 straight playoff turns. And now the juniors and seniors have a legacy that they have to carry on. Trust me, that I know that there is such a fine line, probably the width of that sheet of paper, a fine line between winning and losing and going on and getting into that mode or that mentality. Our kids have had that for 10 years now, almost 12 years at the baseball program. And at one point in time, when we turn the corner in football, that will be the same thing. When you realize that no matter how big they are, no matter how many stars that they have, we have big players, we have stars too. We looked at something that we looked at the possibility of changing some things in our coaching staff. I know that there were people that didn't like the idea of Coach Ditzworth and Coach Bird coming over from a sister school at Lansing Eastern. And 2 years ago, we were knocking heads, and now we're back and coaching on the same staff. But in 33 years, I know this: if you continue to do the same things that you did 33 years ago, you will fail. You must forge ahead. You must change, you must adapt, and you must create something that will give the kids that edge. Once they get the edge, then it is not coaching. Coaching is giving them the edge. Playing and the players then is what takes over. Brighton couldn't have played a better ball game. That was the offense that we looked at. That's the offense that we talked about. We didn't all buy into that offense. What that offense is predicated on is you pass the football and you set up the run. We've always been run first and then set up the pass. It was something new, it was something different. Our seniors wanted to run the football. It's a senior line, and that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to run off tackle. But I also realize is that you do not run off tackle and beat the Catholic Centrals of AA. You do not run off tackle and beat the Rockfords. Midland showed us that. And so in our program, we have to try as coaches to give the kids the edge. It didn't work out this year, But I've learned a long time ago that you're not going to make everybody happy, and everything does not work out in life. There are ups and downs, there are disappointments, there are times that people just knock you flat on your back. And what do? You have to get up. That's what this game tells us. We have to get up off of our back, and we have to dust ourselves off and go right back at it. We are not going to turn tail and hide. We were disappointed, tremendously disappointed. Those first 3 games showed what our team, when it was healthy, was capable of. The injuries kind of brought us down pretty hard. And I think that we all kind of lost confidence. You lost confidence in us. We lost confidence in each other. The kids lost confidence in both the coaches. They lost confidence in each other. I mean, I could go out and play if it was 33-0, but a lot of kids didn't get to play against East Lansing. But to come back in Sexton and then have a tremendous effort on the part, Sexton, when they had their quarterback and Carter's healthy, that's as good a football team as there is in the state of Michigan. That team has size, speed, and they have all the tools. They could have easily been a state champion. But when they got the injury bug, and they didn't have their quarterback, and their tailback didn't play and virtually came in the end of the first half, they found out too. And they got a good whipping from East Lansing. So those 2 games, and the other thing that it did, and I feel bad about this, but once you knew that those first 2 games were gone, underclassmen had to play because the conference was gone. Nobody was going to lose 2 games this year and stay in the conference race. Much of that disappointment for the seniors was because of the fact that they didn't play as much as they wanted to. We would like to start every senior and play him all the time. But once they got to the point where we knew that those 2 games were gone, then we had to start playing more underclassmen. And we had to play them in positions that hurt. They hurt to the seniors to have to, all of a sudden that you started for 2 years and now you have to start doling out some of your time. But nobody said that it's an easy job or an easy task. Playing football, coaching football, being a parent of a football player, there is no shame in ever crying for your kids. And if anybody saw this Brian Gumble special, this Tim Stratton, who was a young man that was at DeMatha High School in Washington, D.C., and had already just about every Division I school looking at him as a quarterback. And he went to the beach in the summer of his senior year, dove in the beach, hit his head on something, paralyzed this kid. University of Maryland honored that. Now he goes around, he's in a wheelchair, goes around. You know, when we think sometimes that this is life and death, and we look at that and we keep it in perspective, that we want our sons and our daughters to participate and be healthy, and to, sure, we'd like to see them win every game, because that's when everybody gives all the attention to us. But as I put in there, they learn more about themselves in this season than they would in 10 seasons of being undefeated. So as the season progressed, I mean, if we'd had the injuries before we'd have played some of the other teams, we could have overcome those injuries. We happened to have our injuries when it was impossible to overcome. East Lansing was an outstanding football team, as it showed going to the semifinals. Sexton was, I think, as fine a football team as there was in the state of Michigan. They could beat anybody when they had all their players healthy. So I know that for the guys, the loss of Jackson was very disappointing for myself as well as for the kids. And I know it was for you as well. But in this business, you learn one thing, that there is nobody that feels sorry for you. A lot of people, in the community, I can't tell you some of the comments that I heard people yell over the fence, along the fence. But I feel bad about that until I go to the all-conference meeting. Jeff Smith went after one of his parents, grabbed him by the front of his shirt in the Waverly game, almost pulled him over the fence. He was so upset about this dad cursing at him, and they were just killing poor Waverly. And the guy was cursing him and yelling at him. Jackson's coach, they start out 3-0. He sees the dad walking across the turf to come to practice, and the dad goes up, takes his son by the arm, walks him over to the coach and says, "Tell him." Coach looks at this boy, And this is his starting quarterback. He says, "I quit." Coach Pack from Jackson tells me, he said, "You quit? You're the starting quarterback." His dad probably goes on to tell him that he's not getting enough playing time. In their first 3 games, they had 160 offensive plays. His son played 130 of them. The other kid, who was a senior, who started almost every game last year, had only had 30 turns, 30 plays that he ran. And of course, it goes right down the line. You know, a lot of coaches say, "Well, you think you've got it tough." You know, there isn't anybody that feels sorry for us. And working with your sons is what really keeps us going in the game, because we got such great kids here at Grand Ledge. It's a reflection of you people, you folks. But it also is something that we need to work on. We need to work on that. We don't need people coming and not knowing anything about what your sons do or what we do for a living, half drunk, laying over the fence, screaming and swearing at your sons and at us. I mean, that's ridiculous. And most of those people are trying to live vicariously through their, you know, that we're all, you know, winning everything, and they all want to show up when we win. When we lose, they don't want to show up, or they want to scream and holler and swear at all of us. The underclassmen will be reminded of that next year, and I'm sure that we will show people that Grand Ledge is not dead. Holt made it to the Silver Dome. Have they won 4 games since then, Denny? 4 or 5 maybe? But, I mean, all of a sudden, here were the same people, same coaches. And they went all the way to the Silver Dome and lost in the finals to Catholic Central. But now all of a sudden everybody says, you know, those guys, they don't know what they're doing and they can't judge the talent, et cetera, which that's part of the mystique about the coaching profession. Your folks never would have ever gone to the coach. Your folks would have never said anything about the coach. My mother and dad, right or wrong, they were always right. I never heard any of that. And so we need to get that back in Grand Ledge. We need to get the enthusiasm back for the kids and for the players. And it's not going to be easy to do. And we're going to work on this possibility, and we're not going to let this lie, where people are going to come to the games and think that they can rant and rave at our kids when they know nothing about what our kids do, or what our coaches do. I mean, some communities, they may accept that. This community, we're not going to accept it. And so we need to work together to make it as positive a thing. I mean, we set the standard high here. We go to the playoffs 3 years in a row. There aren't many schools that can make that claim. My high school went 30 years without having a football champion. 30 years before they had a championship football team. Not a state championship. I mean a conference championship. 30 years. So this is something I think that we need to look at, and something that we need to really study and to make a great attempt. And it starts with every one of us, as parents, as citizens, as people of the community, as supporters of these young men up here. So I think they conducted themselves with about as much class and dignity as any team that I've seen in 33 years. You know how frustrating it is to be out there and to have people screaming and hollering at you. You know how frustrating it is to look around and lose confidence in your coaches. You know how frustrating it is to work as hard as these guys have worked in the weight room and everything, and then turn around and see it not materialize and not to help. But in the long run, it will help them. In the long run, before they ever quit, they'll think about the tough times that they went through. And we talk about a 6-3 season as tough times. We're spoiled. We're spoiled. And we set that bar high. And we set our standards high. And we expect them to do the right thing. And did you see any of your sons throwing their helmets? Did you see any of your sons getting in fights on the football field? No. They showed a lot of class. I even had people tell me that, you know, they lose too easy. They're too gracious when they lose. And I'm thinking to myself, do you have a clue? Do you have any idea what it is to be disciplined and to go out there and face that kind of frustration without hauling off and hitting somebody? I mean, just think of the restraint that they show that people our age can't drive down the road without trying to ram somebody or try to shoot somebody. I mean, road rage and all the rest of the things, and this is what they have to look at as a grown-up society. That was the one thing that made me feel as good and reflecting on the season. I think about these kids every night before I close my eyes. I think about these kids when I get up in the morning. I think about them all the time. Because there aren't many times that, you know, I've had to stand before you and say that I was not confident that we did a very good job as a coaching staff. I didn't feel that we meshed. We just, you know, when the kids have chemistry, it's the same thing for us. And when you know that you're teaching them, it's always easy to say, oh yeah, you know, he doesn't have what it takes. But that's what coaching is about. To me, it's about making sure that they get the job done and giving them that edge. So now let's move on to some things that are a little bit more enjoyable. We'll start out and try to keep it limited to 4 hours. How's about that? Huh? I heard Mrs. Coleman tell her son to sit right up front and keep tapping his wrist, like he had a wristwatch on and everything. But I'm sorry, but I can't have somebody that came here and has spent 6 or 7 years in the football program and just tell them to, you know, oh, here's your award and good night, you know, have a nice life. I mean, I don't get a chance, and I'd like to have an opportunity. I don't get a chance to go see Mark up there at Ferris, and I don't get a chance to see Andy at the University of Michigan or Jake at Toledo. I lost my youngest brother, my oldest brother, and my mother within 2 years. I never had a chance to grieve. And the reason that I just didn't have a chance to grieve is that I have to take care of young people and be a mentor. And the thing that saved me was that I have such a loving family, and Melody takes care of me, and then that I can move on with my life. And so please bear with me, because I don't want to slight any of your sons because of the contribution that they made this year. So we'll start with our 2 sophomores. And first young man came up, and I know his mom and dad were worried about him as a running back, and John's not the biggest football player in stature, but I can tell you this, that John Hawkins this year did more than what us coaches thought that we wanted him to do. And certainly when Mike got hurt and Derek got hurt, you know, that put him in a situation, which, by the way, the 2-platoon system, I know that a lot of you had problems with that. I had a problem with the 2-platoon system. And especially when somebody gets hurt, and then all of a sudden we've got Gary over there on defense, and we've got Joe McLean on defense. But we were committed to that. And that first loss at East Lansing didn't do anything to destroy our confidence that these young guys that are playing one way, we try to get more people to play. Is that going to make everybody happy? Did it make anybody happy? Obviously, it didn't make too many people happy. But it still was, I think, a major role in the success that some of these young players had. And so instead of splitting a lot of his time doing both offense and defense, John was able to learn a lot about offense. How about his kickoff return that he ran back against East Kentwood to start that second half? I mean, did that bring all of us one of our great thrills of the season? And in other words, watching the highlights of the game films of this year, you know, the time that Ryan hit him on the swing pass coming out of the backfield against Sexton, and for all the great players that they had on the field, they didn't get John. He got into the end zone and scored a touchdown for us. So we're looking for big things from John for the next couple years. So, John Hawkins. or the sophomore, Luke Mullins. Once again, I know that having a sophomore up there that takes away playing time from the juniors and seniors is not always appreciated, but if you get into 13 or 14 games, I mean, you need a lot of players, and especially at the level that we play at. You know, people talk about playing two ways. Yeah, maybe in C and D when people are not 275, 300 pounds that are pounding away on you down after down like they are in our league. But Luke came up and at the start of the year showed some great potential, and as the year went along, he just did an outstanding job. Hopefully the playing time that we got him this year is going to carry over and certainly be something that he will learn by test of fire in his sophomore year. And I think that if you're capable of playing on the varsity, whether you're a 9th grader or a 10th grader, this is important. So he got some valuable playing time and did a great job. Luke Mullins. Okay, you have your list, Coach? I'll start, and we'll just come right down. I got one that's right there, so we'll take Matt first, and we'll just go numerically. So we'll take first one, number 1, Matt Bonet. Did a great job for us this year. Outstanding season. Got a lot of playing time. 2-quarterback system. We didn't like that idea. Ditz is a quarterback. Denny was a quarterback. I was a quarterback. And you'd like to have a 1-quarterback system. But when our quarterback got hurt last year, when Brad got hurt, Ryan hadn't gotten enough times or turns to really be able to go out there and compete at the level that we needed to do against Midland. And so whose fault is that? Well, it's you can say that it's the coach's fault, and sometimes it is. But in a 2-quarterback system, there was just playing time divided up. And I know that people, everybody would like to see, but it happened to Penn State, it happened to the University of Michigan, it's happened to a lot of colleges, where you can put all that emphasis on one of the quarterbacks, and then he gets hurt, and then what happens? But Matt and Ryan probably handled it better than a lot of us did, and certainly in the sense that they got the opportunity to see that there are tough battles in life, and you can't make them all perfect. And I respect these 2 young men because they worked through it and encouraged each other. And as we talk about later on with the All-Conference Awards, Matt just did a great job for us punting-wise, and we look forward to having some great things out of him for next year. We know that he will be a leader for us, and we go back to the 1-quarterback system. Without 2 seniors, we went all the way down to the freshman level. That's without either saying that Chad or Colin would have to play quarterback. So once we got by that 1 senior player, and we knew once we lost those 2 games, Matt has to play too. That's the other thing. Once you're out of the conference, you better not play all senior. And the kids, I respect the way that they handle themselves. So next year, Matt Bonet. Okay, now do I get a half an hour, Melody, to talk about your son? Okay, so she's going to make me not say much about her son, right? And so it's always tough to coach your own sons. Colin's the 3rd son that I've had to coach, and assistant coaches always make it easier when they go out and do the job for your sons. And I know that Park Baker and Garth Barrett and those guys did a great job with Dennis and Patrick, and so Coach Ditz and did a great job with Colin. He had an outstanding year. Continues to have an outstanding academic area. He and Brian are the only 4-point students on the football team, but we got all those other guys that are, like I said, 18 of them besides those 2 that are 3.5s or above. So Colin had a great year, and we look forward to him having another good season next year. Colin. Next one of our juniors. If there was anything that I would say about the underclassmen, after the Jackson game, I said, you guys go in there and you're not coming out of school until you get some chemistry. So it was 5 o'clock and the other coaches are going, are those guys coming out? I said, well, hell, I better go check on them. Maybe they all went home. So I went in there and happened to catch some of the things that some of your sons were saying to each other, and to just stand out there in the hall and listen to them. I was pretty darn proud of the maturity that a lot of them have, and some of the things that they said to each other were things beyond their years. And sometimes we only confuse the issue as parents and as adults and as coaches. And so some of the things that I heard these young men say, but was really moving for me as far as the idea that they had a better grip on things than I ever thought they did. And it just shows the character of a lot of them. And as I have said many times, and I said in there, fame and character are all things that people think that they know how you retain that, but it's a fleeting moment. It's gone. I mean, just quickly. We have more character on this team. And if they were in that playoffs and had gone down the road, we certainly wouldn't be as somber as some of us are this evening. We'd be a lot happier about things that they accomplished. For me, I know that there were things that they accomplished far beyond the win and losing part of it, as people and as young men. And the next young man couldn't exemplify that any better. He's got probably one of the best pair of hands on the team. And Tim George next year, I think, is going to have an outstanding season for us. He goes in the weight room every day. He works diligently. And Tim's just, like all of our kids, is a person that's intense about doing well and a great student. And he has to be, because he has me for history, so I have to watch all of them. But Tim's going to have a good year for us next year. Tim George. Moving on numerically, next young man has been on the varsity for 2 years, only a junior, and I think that Chad showed some of the best defensive skills and in the secondary this year, and I think Chad is going to be an outstanding. When we went down to Rockford, he did a great job, against Brighton, he did a great job on their number one receiver. Some of the guys that killed us weren't the guys that we thought would be best, and of course the quarterback, as Coach Bird said when he watched him play against Rockford, I mean, he just he had the game of his career against us, and but Chad has done an outstanding job for us in the defensive secondary, and these 2 years of experience are certainly something that, along with Colin and the other defensive backs, have got a lot of playing time, Matt and them. They did a really good job for us. I thought that that Brighton game, Brighton has put that offense in when Drew Henson was freshman, and so they've been using that for, what's Drew been out, Jim, 2 years? So it's like 6 years that they've been using that offense. And so they've got her down pretty good. But I thought our kids did, as good as we could, as expected, when we had somebody that was just on the money for almost everything that he threw, and they made some remarkable catches. But Chad's had 2 great years. We look forward to another year for him. Chad Esper. Next one of our juniors went out there, and when we were throwing the ball a lot, the defensive backs had a lot of opportunity to get a lot of repetitions, a lot of turns in. And so Rich Gregory, along with all the other kids in the defensive backfield, I think that at times we were confident that with as many good skill players, that's why I guess we were over-optimistic at times. We forgot about East Lansing and how much talent they had. We kind of put aside our thoughts about how strong Sexton would be. But we had kids that every day came, showed up on time, did whatever we asked them to do, and just were a pleasure to be around. I don't think there was any day that I went home and ever said that, you know, I was just disappointed in the way that the kids participated, the way that they acted. I mean, they're just a great bunch of kids. And so Rich did an excellent job this year, and I hope that he's in the weight room a lot, and so that he can get some more playing time next year. Rich Gregory. Next of our defensive backs, I know that we did the 7-on-7s up to Elm College, and Coach Disworth and Coach Loney and myself just said, boy, that Matt Cook is around the ball every play. He's always around the football. No matter where they throw the ball, he's just there. So I know in looking at Matt, a lot of people thought, well, he's another football player, like Chad and Colin, and I hope that a lot of the other guys get the same feeling about working hard and getting in the weight room. Matt's going to be an outstanding football player for us next year. He did an outstanding job this year, played hard. He was doing strong safety a lot of times, and he got himself hammered around and pounded around pretty good. And when we went up and visited him in the hospital a couple of years ago, just think of where the kids come from when they have some adversity and some illness, when they're, you know, a lot of times you think all of a sudden here he is going out there against East Lansing, Sexton, Jackson with all the big people that they had. But Matt Cook played a great season for us this year. Matt Cook. Next one of our juniors is a person that we had kind of a hard time figuring out where he should fit in. Not that we didn't think that he could play running back, but Joe McLean is an athlete that kind of catches you in coaching, because you know he's good on both sides of the ball. You try to put him on one side of the ball so that other kids can play on the other side of the ball. It doesn't always work out that way. It just sometimes. Coach Bongard and I have said many times that the ideal number is about 40 players. And when you start getting close to 60 players, figuring out where everybody fits in, sometimes you hope that you're going to get 12 or 13 football games in. You hope that there's enough playing time for everybody. And when you're, 9-0 or 10-0, everybody is happy. I mean, our kids came off the bench and did better than any team that I've ever seen in my 33 years. We scored on people when we went from first offenses to second offenses and right on to third offense, and we held people in check with the other defensive players. That makes you feel good. That shows me that those guys, these coaches, are doing their job when the kids go out there and play as well as they do. Next year, Joe, the two-platoon system probably, we tried that, not that we won't continue to use that as much. So over the last 4 or 5 years, we've hardly had kids play both ways. Joe is certainly one of those dilemmas, because Joe's good enough to play on both sides. And so we just have to go back to the drawing board and work hard to make sure that we get him playing time that he's capable of doing, and we know that he's going to work hard in the weight room and be one of our strongest players. Joe McLean. I promise to give you a potty break too when we get through the juniors. Next one of our juniors, another 3'8", 5 or whatever student that he is, and I know that probably Patrick could have thought that we could have done him a lot bigger favors than to stick him out there in the Brighton game, but I know Coach Disworth had a lot of confidence in him, and we went out there and I had the confidence that Patrick practices hard as anybody on the team. I don't care if we ran a sweep or if we threw an out pattern clear across the field on the opposite side of where Pat was playing cornerback, he would sprint over there all the time. But I mean, those kind of people are going to play. And he will find a way to get on the field next year just out of hard work, and he's another one. I know that that's the one thing that I can say about a lot of these players. When Coach Rademacher and Coach Greer opened in the weight room, and I'm down in my room fielding just about every call from every university that you can think of, from Division I to Division III. But I had one of my first ones the other day when I had, what is that they play, that Bantam League out there, out east. Is a gym that you have to be less than 160 pounds. In University of Penn and some of those schools, I think some of the Ivy League schools play that less than 160 pounds. That's the maximum you can weigh to play in that. So I even got a letter from them about going there. So, but these guys are in that weight room. They work hard at making themselves better athletes. And at our level, that's something that you have to do. But Patrick really works hard, and he's going to be a big contributor for us next year. Patrick Kleinfeld. When I tell the college coaches that our kicker kicks the ball right down on the goal line almost every time that he kicks off, and then I tell them that he's a toe puncher, they all kind of act like he's what? Yeah, I guess the colleges, they just don't think about that anymore because everybody kicks soccer style, but not everybody. And so Nick had a great year for us. He was another one that got pressed into service, and I think sometimes we're worried about, well, we'll have to dust off that old shoe. Pat Bartlett, you still got that shoe? Huh? What'd you do with it? Uh-oh. But we knew that there wasn't anybody, and Chad and Colin and all the rest of them, they love to go out there on the Thursdays and kick the ball and everything, but Nick did a great job for us, and we promised that when we didn't kick the field goal in Jackson, that was probably our mistake. When we did kick the field goal at Brighton, that was probably our mistake. And so there were times that we maybe protected him, but he's a hitter. I mean, you parents that know from watching him over the last couple of years that when Nick could kick the ball off all the way through freshman, JV, and varsity level, if he had a clean shot at somebody, they knew that he wasn't just a kicker. So we're looking for big things for him from him next year, and he'll do a good job. Nick Sandy. Next one of our juniors is a young man that, once again, I have to show prejudice to him because he has all this Notre Dame stuff, and every once in a while down in South Bend I see him standing up down there and towards the tunnel. And so Tim Veers is about as big a Notre Dame fan maybe as any of the O'Keeffes are, and that's pretty tough to accomplish, to match us for our Notre Dame energy. But Tim was another person that he's overcome shoulder injury and has stuck it out there and came to practice every day. And I think that some of the comments that those guys made is that we have to do better in order to make the first string better or make the seniors better. And I think that was a lot of the attitude about the junior class and our two sophomores, was to go out there and do the best that they could to try to help their team to work and be successful in any way that they could. So that's another thing that brings a smile to my face, that those guys were out there and never gave up and never screwed around. They worked hard all the time and were well disciplined. When they got in the game, they did a good job too. Tim Veers.